The metal of the airport seat pressed against my numb legs. Around me, families chattered, oblivious to the storm raging inside me. My own family, asterisk my own family, was on a plane, thousands of feet in the air, leaving me stranded in Dubai. The neon lights of the duty-free shops blurred through my unshed tears. They were gone, and the 7 words my brother spat at me before he disappeared echoed in my head, a venomous promise I knew he would keep. If you have a brother or sister, subscribe now so you always have each other's backs. It started with a trip, a supposed family vacation to reconnect, to bridge the growing distance between us all. My father, a man who always seemed more comfortable with spreadsheets than feelings, had somehow decided we needed quality time. My mother, ever the peacemaker, readily agreed. My older brother, Ethan, usually aloof and absorbed in his own world, was surprisingly enthusiastic. And then there was me, Lily, 14 and perpetually caught in the crossfire of their unspoken tensions, cautiously optimistic that maybe, just maybe, this trip could change things. I'd always felt like an outsider in my own family, my accomplishments minimized, my opinions dismissed. Ethan was the golden child, the one who could do no wrong in my mother's eyes. He was athletic, charming, and effortlessly popular, everything I was. I was quiet, studious, and preferred the company of books to people. In their eyes, I was simply there. The trip to Dubai was supposed to be a fresh start, a chance to prove myself, to finally earn their approval. But from the moment we arrived at the airport, I felt a familiar unease creeping in. Ethan's smiles seemed a little too wide, his reassurances a little too frequent. My mother's doting attention on him felt amplified, while I was relegated to carrying luggage and fetching snacks. Small things, seemingly insignificant on their own, but together they formed a pattern, a chilling premonition of what was to come. During the layover in Dubai, Ethan asked to see my passport and ticket, claiming he wanted to double-check our gate number. Trustingly, I handed them over, completely unaware that this simple act would shatter my world. He disappeared into the crowd, and I waited, patiently at first, then with growing anxiety as the minutes ticked by. When I finally approached my parents, concern etched on my face, they simply shrugged, dismissing my worries. "He's probably just getting a drink," my mother said, her eyes glued to her phone. But deep down, I knew something was wrong, very wrong. Then came the announcement our flight was boarding. Panic flared in my chest. "Ethan still isn't back," I said, my voice trembling. My father sighed, annoyance flickering in his eyes. "He'll catch up," he said, waving me off. "Let's just go." I pleaded, begged them to wait, but they were already moving towards the gate, swept along by the throng of passengers. "He knows the way," my mother said over her shoulder, her voice dismissive. "He'll be fine." I stood there, frozen, torn between loyalty and a growing sense of dread. As I watched them disappear down the jet bridge, a cold wave of understanding washed over me. They weren't coming back. They were leaving me. The person I trusted most, was one of them. The digital clock above the information booth blinked mockingly, 6:17 p.m. My parents' flight to London was scheduled to depart in less than an hour. Abandonment, cold and sharp, pierced through the initial shock. I ran, blindly pushing through the throngs of travelers, desperate to reach the Emirates customer service desk. My voice cracked as I explained my situation, the words tumbling out in a jumbled mess of panic and disbelief. The agent, a woman with tired eyes and a practiced smile, listened patiently, but her response offered little comfort. "I'm sorry, miss, but without a parent or guardian we can't issue you a new ticket, and your parents are already checked in for their flight." Checked in. As if this was a simple oversight, a forgotten toothbrush, tears welled, blurring her face. "But they left me," I choked out, the reality of their betrayal hitting me with full force. "They just left me here." Agent's smile faltered, replaced by a flicker of something that might have been pity. She offered me a form to fill out, a report to file with airport security. "They'll look into it, miss," she said, her voice devoid of any real hope. "But in the meantime, you'll have to stay here." Stay here? Where was I supposed to go? I had no money, no phone, no way to contact anyone. My passport and ticket were with Ethan, undoubtedly nestled safely in his pocket as he jetted across the Atlantic with my parents. The weight of my isolation pressed down on me, suffocating me. The airport, once a symbol of adventure and excitement, had become my prison. I spent the next few hours in a daze, wandering aimlessly through the terminal, my stomach twisted in knots. I tried calling my parents' cell phones, but they went straight to voicemail. Ethan's number was disconnected. Each unanswered call deepened the icy dread in my heart. They were ignoring me. Intentionally. Sleep was impossible. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw their faces, their dismissive shrugs, their backs turned as they walked away. The memory of Ethan's cruel smirk as he snatched my passport haunted me. What had I done to deserve this? Why did they hate me so much? I replayed every interaction, every conversation, searching for clues, for some explanation, but found nothing. Only a gnawing sense of inadequacy and the crushing realization that my family, the people who were supposed to love and protect me, had deliberately abandoned me in a foreign country. As the hours stretched into days, I learned to survive. I slept on uncomfortable airport benches, huddled beneath my thin jacket, the constant noise and bright lights a relentless assault on my senses. I ate sparingly, rationing the few snacks I had managed to salvage from my backpack. I washed in the grimy airport restrooms, my reflection in the cracked mirror a stranger, gaunt, hollow-eyed, and utterly alone. I spent hours watching other families, their laughter and easy affection a painful reminder of what I had lost. I envied their normalcy, their security, their unwavering belief in the bonds of family. But beneath the despair, a flicker of something else began to ignite. Anger. A slow, burning rage that simmered beneath the surface. It wasn't fair. What they had done was unforgivable. The injustice of it all fueled a growing desire for retribution. I started to observe, to listen, to gather information. The airport became my hunting ground, and my targets were my own family. I would find out why they had done this to me, and when I did, they would regret the day they left me behind. The first crack in their perfect facade appeared unexpectedly. While scouring the internet on a library computer, after finally managing to convince a sympathetic librarian to let me use it, I stumbled upon a small, local news article from London. It mentioned my father, his name bold and prominent, and a new business venture he was launching. A venture that required a significant investment, an investment that, according to the article, had been secured just days before our supposed family vacation. A cold realization dawned on me. The trip to Dubai wasn't about reconnecting, it was a carefully orchestrated smokescreen. They needed to get rid of me to disappear me without raising suspicion. I was a liability, an obstacle to their plans. But what plans? And why was I such a threat? The questions swirled in my mind, fueling my determination to uncover the truth. They thought they had silenced me, they were wrong. The news article was a breadcrumb, a clue that led me down a rabbit hole of corporate filings and offshore accounts. My father's new venture was a tech company specializing in artificial intelligence. A lucrative field, no doubt, but something about the timing felt off. Why abandon me now, just as he was on the verge of success? What role did Ethan play in all of this? The answers remained elusive, hidden behind layers of legal jargon and financial doublespeak. I spent my days hunched over library computers, poring over documents, my mind racing, trying to piece together the puzzle. My nights were filled with nightmares, shadowy figures chasing me through endless airport terminals, my parents' faces contorted in cruel smiles. Sleep offered no escape, only a relentless replay of my abandonment. The anger that had initially fueled me began to wane, replaced by a bone-deep weariness. Doubt crept in, whispering insidious questions in my ear. Was I strong enough to do this? Was I just wasting my time? Maybe they were right about me. Maybe I was just a burden, a nuisance they were better off without. One evening, after another fruitless day of searching, I found myself wandering through the airport food court, the smell of stale pizza and greasy fries doing little to quell my nausea. I watched families laughing, sharing meals, their faces glowing with love and contentment. The contrast between their happiness and my own misery was unbearable. I felt a sob rising in my throat, a wave of despair threatening to engulf me. I sank onto a nearby bench, burying my face in my hands, the tears finally flowing freely. I was alone, penniless, and utterly lost. They had won. They had broken me. A security guard approached, his face etched with concern. "Miss, are you all right?" He asked, his voice surprisingly gentle. I shook my head, unable to speak, the tears streaming down my face. He offered me a bottle of water and a packet of tissues, his kindness a stark contrast to the cruelty I had experienced. "It's going to be okay," he said, his words a hollow platitude, but somehow they offered a sliver of comfort. He told me about his own struggles, his own hardships, how he had overcome adversity through sheer determination and resilience. His story resonated with me, reminding me that I wasn't the only one who had faced unimaginable challenges. As I listened to him, something shifted within me. The despair began to recede, replaced by a renewed sense of resolve. I wouldn't let them win. I wouldn't let them define me. I would fight back, not with violence or anger, but with intelligence and cunning. I would use their own arrogance against them. I would expose their lies and reveal their true nature to the world. The security guard's name was Omar. He became my unlikely ally, a source of information and support in a world that had turned its back on me. He helped me navigate the complex bureaucracy of the airport, teaching me how to access resources and avoid detection. He even let me use his phone to make a few carefully chosen calls, calls that would set my plan in motion. I started keeping a journal, documenting every detail of my investigation, every clue I uncovered, every conversation I had. It became my lifeline, a tangible record of my progress, a reminder of my purpose. I knew that the road ahead would be long and difficult, but I was no longer afraid. I had nothing left to lose and everything to gain. The day they abandoned me, they created a monster. They had mistaken my silence for weakness, my vulnerability for defeat. They were about to learn just how wrong they were. The game had changed. I was no longer the victim. I was the hunter, and they were my prey, my biggest advantage. They had no idea what was coming. They believed I was gone, forgotten, a discarded inconvenience. They underestimated me, and that was their fatal mistake. I started small, focusing on gathering as much information as possible about my father's company, Novatech AI. Omar helped me access public records, scouring databases for any hint of wrongdoing. I learned about shell corporations, offshore accounts, and the complex web of financial transactions that shielded the company from scrutiny. The more I dug, the more I realized that Novatech AI wasn't just a tech company, it was a front for something far more sinister. The AI they were developing wasn't meant to improve lives, it was designed for surveillance, for control. My father wasn't just an ambitious businessman, he was a willing participant in a dangerous game, a game that threatened the privacy and freedom of millions. Ethan's role was less clear, but I suspected he was more involved than I initially thought. He had always been ambitious, eager to please my father, willing to do whatever it took to earn his approval. I remembered snippets of conversations, hushed phone calls, late-night meetings, things that had seemed insignificant at the time, but now took on a sinister new meaning. He was the fixer, the one who cleaned up messes, the one who ensured that everything ran smoothly. As I pieced together the truth, I knew that I couldn't just expose their financial crimes. I had to reveal the true nature of Novatech AI, the danger it posed to the world. But how? I was just a 14-year-old girl, alone in a foreign country with no resources and no allies. They were powerful, wealthy, and connected. They could crush me without a second thought. I needed proof, irrefutable evidence that would expose their lies and bring them to justice. I remembered a conversation I had overheard between my father and Ethan a few weeks before the trip. They were discussing a secure server, a digital vault where they stored all their sensitive data. It was located in Novatech AI's headquarters in London, heavily guarded and virtually impenetrable. But there was one vulnerability, a backdoor that Ethan had created for himself, a way to access the server remotely in case of emergencies. He had bragged about it, confident that no one would ever discover it. I filed that piece of information away, recognizing its potential value. Now, it was my only hope. The problem was, I didn't know how to hack into a secure server. I barely knew how to use a computer, but I was a quick learner and I was determined to find a way. I started spending hours at the library, researching cybersecurity, coding, and hacking techniques. I devoured online tutorials, watched countless videos, and practiced on dummy systems until my fingers ached. It was slow, painstaking work, but I refused to give up. Omar introduced me to a friend of his, a young man named Sami who worked as a freelance programmer. Sami was initially skeptical of my abilities, but when he saw my determination and the depth of my knowledge, he agreed to help me. He taught me how to use specialized software, how to bypass security protocols, and how to cover my tracks. He became my mentor, my guide, my partner in crime. Together, we devised a plan to access the secure server, download the incriminating data, and expose it to the world. It was a long shot, a desperate gamble, but it was the only chance I had. The plan was complex and risky. I would need to create a fake identity, obtain a temporary visa, and travel to London without raising suspicion. I would need to infiltrate Novatech AI's headquarters, locate the server room, and use Ethan's back door to gain access. And I would need to do it all without getting caught. The stakes were incredibly high. If I failed, I could face arrest, imprisonment, or worse. But I couldn't back down. I had come too far, sacrificed too much. I owed it to myself, to the people whose lives were threatened by Novatech AI, to see this through to the end. I knew that my parents and Ethan would stop at nothing to protect their secrets. They had already shown me the depths of their cruelty, their willingness to abandon me in a foreign country. But they had underestimated my resilience, my intelligence, and my determination. They thought they had silenced me. They were about to learn that they had unleashed a force they couldn't control. As I prepared for my journey to London, I felt a strange sense of calm. The fear and doubt had dissipated, replaced by a steely resolve. I was no longer the scared, vulnerable girl they had left behind. I was a warrior, armed with knowledge, fueled by anger, and driven by a burning desire for revenge. The game was on. The fake identity was surprisingly easy to obtain. A combination of a forged birth certificate, thanks to Sami's impressive Photoshop skills, and a sympathetic embassy worker, Omar knew everyone, got me a temporary student visa. My destination, London. My cover story, an aspiring journalist researching artificial intelligence. The lie tasted like ash in my mouth, but it was necessary. My first stop was a cheap hostel in East London, a far cry from the luxurious hotels my parents were used to. The room was cramped and dirty, the air thick with the smell of stale cigarettes and desperation, but it was safe. For now. I spent the next few days casing Novatech AI's headquarters, a sleek glass and steel building in the heart of the city's tech district. Security was tight. Cameras were everywhere, and guards patrolled the perimeter around the clock. Getting inside would be a challenge, but I had a plan. Sami had created a sophisticated piece of software that could bypass the building's security system, disabling the cameras and unlocking doors for a limited time. It was risky, but it was my only way in. The backdoor Ethan had created was my golden ticket. According to my research, the server room was located on the 5th floor, accessible only by a restricted elevator. I needed to get to that elevator without being detected, a task that seemed impossible given the constant surveillance. I decided to play the part of the naive student journalist, hopping to charm my way past the receptionists and security guards. I dressed in my most presentable clothes, plastered on a fake smile, and walked into the lobby, my heart pounding in my chest. "Good morning," I said to the receptionist, my voice trembling slightly. "I'm doing a research project on artificial intelligence, and I was hoping to speak with someone at Novatech AI about their work." The receptionist, a bored-looking woman with tired eyes, barely glanced at me. "Do you have an appointment?" she asked, her voice flat. I shook my head. "No, but I was hoping someone might have a few minutes to spare. It's for a school project." She sighed and pointed to a waiting area. "Fill out this form and someone will be with you shortly." I took the form and sat down, trying to appear calm and collected. I knew that this was just a stalling tactic. They would check me out, run my name through their system, and realize that I was a fraud. I needed to act fast. While the receptionist was distracted, I slipped away from the waiting area and headed towards the elevators. I pressed the button for the 5th floor, praying that no one would notice. The elevator doors opened, and I stepped inside, my breath catching in my throat. As the elevator ascended, I pulled out my laptop and activated Sami's software. The screen flickered, and a series of code appeared, bypassing the security system and disabling the cameras. I had bought myself a few precious minutes. When the elevator doors opened on the 5th floor, I stepped out into a dimly lit hallway. The server room was at the end of the hall, its entrance guarded by a steel door with a keypad. I approached the door, my fingers trembling as I entered the code that Ethan had so carelessly divulged. The keypad beeped, and the door clicked open. I slipped inside, my heart pounding in my chest. The server room was cold and sterile, filled with rows of humming computers and blinking lights. I located the main server, the digital vault that contained all of Novatech AI's secrets. I connected my laptop to the server and began downloading the data, my eyes scanning the room for any sign of detection. The download was slow, agonizingly slow. Each second felt like an eternity. I could hear footsteps approaching, growing louder with each passing moment. They knew I was here. They were coming for me. I ripped the laptop from the server, disconnecting just as the download completed. It had worked. I had the evidence. I turned to flee, but it was too late. Ethan was standing in the doorway, his face contorted in a mask of rage. "What do you think you're doing?" he snarled, his eyes burning with anger. I stood my ground, my fear replaced by a surge of defiance. "I know everything," I said, my voice trembling but firm. "I know about Novatech AI, about the surveillance program, about everything you've been hiding." Ethan lunged at me, his hands outstretched, his intention clear. He was going to silence me, to make me disappear, just like they had done before. But I was ready for him. I sidestepped his attack and slammed the laptop into his face, sending him reeling backward. He stumbled and fell, hitting his head on the edge of a server rack. He lay motionless on the floor, a pool of crimson spreading beneath him. My vision blurred and the room began to spin. Had I gone too far? Had I become the monster they always thought I was? The sound of approaching sirens filled the air, growing louder and louder. I had to get out of here. Now. I fled the server room, leaving Ethan lying on the floor, his fate uncertain. As I ran, I knew that my life had changed forever. I had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. But I had also exposed the truth, revealed the darkness that lurked beneath the surface of Novatech AI, and that was all that mattered. The authorities are coming, but I have sent a message to every news outlet in the world, a file, with everything. Now the world will burn. The world exploded. News alerts pinged across every screen imaginable. Novatech AI exposed, surveillance program unveiled. Tech giants' dark secrets revealed. The file I had sent, the one containing every dirty secret, every shady deal, every line of code from their illegal surveillance program, was now public. The carefully constructed image of Novatech AI shattered into a million pieces. My father, once a celebrated visionary, was now a pariah, his name synonymous with betrayal and deceit. Ethan, last I saw, was being processed by the authorities. Whether he'd survive the head trauma was up to fate, but Novatech AI, that was my true target. The politicians who had championed Novatech AI scrambled to distance themselves. Investors fled, sending the company's stock plummeting. The building I had infiltrated, the gleaming symbol of their power, was now swarming with investigators. The facade had crumbled. I watched it all unfold from my dingy hostel room, a strange sense of detachment washing over me. The anger that had consumed me for so long began to dissipate, replaced by a hollow emptiness. It was over. They were finished. My phone rang. It was Omar. "They know it was you," he said, his voice urgent. "They're looking for you." I knew this was coming. I had anticipated it, but I wasn't afraid. I had already won. "I'm ready," I said. I packed my meager belongings, gathered my forged documents, and slipped out of the hostel, disappearing into the labyrinthine streets of London. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew I couldn't stay. I was a ghost, a shadow, forever marked by the events of the past few weeks. I found temporary refuge with Sami, crashing on his couch while I figured out my next move. He offered me words of comfort, telling me that I had done the right thing, that I had saved countless lives. But his words offered little solace. The crimson of what I had done haunted me. The cost of revenge was heavy. Weeks turned into months. I moved from city to city, always looking over my shoulder, always fearing discovery. The news coverage of Novatech AI's downfall eventually faded, replaced by other scandals, other tragedies. But for me, it was always there, a constant reminder of what I had done. Then, one day, I saw my father on television. He was giving a press conference, his face gaunt and weary, his eyes filled with remorse. He admitted everything. He confessed to his crimes. He begged for forgiveness. I watched him unmoved. His words were empty, meaningless. He had abandoned me, betrayed me, left me to die. He didn't deserve forgiveness. In the end, Novatech AI was dismantled. Its assets were seized, its technology was shut down. The surveillance program was exposed for what it was: a dangerous violation of privacy and freedom. My father and his accomplices faced criminal charges, their lives ruined, their reputations destroyed. Ethan was never the same, the incident having changed him forever. They lost everything. I just smiled. It wasn't a happy smile or a triumphant smile. It was a quiet, knowing smile. The smile of someone who had seen the darkness and emerged, scarred but unbroken. I disappeared, changed my name, started a new life far away from the shadows of my past. I never spoke of what happened, never revealed my true identity. I carried the secret with me, a burden and a reminder. Revenge isn't sweet, it's necessary. Would you have done the same? Let me know in the comments. Subscribe for more justice.